About how we're going to move forward. There's nothing like coming in early Sunday morning, starting to lay down and kind of put my final thoughts together when I open my computer, get on the iPad, and there's a lot missing from what I finished. And so if you save things on the cloud, just make sure those things get saved, because when I got in this morning, it was all but 300 words was gone. I mean, my intro was there, everything else was gone. And so if you want to put somebody into a panic, well, it kind of put me into a little bit of a panic. It's there, but all of a sudden now you got to think through, okay, what's really important? And it's like the Holy Spirit kind of, same kind of path, but it just kind of came out a little bit different, at least in the first gathering. We'll see how it goes here this morning. But I'm excited to be able to talk about forward movement and what that looks like in some ways individually and for us as a church. Now, I realize that when I mentioned that word forward movement, that there are maybe different thoughts that came to mind for you. And it may mean something different for each of us depending on our context and what our life, looks like right now in the moment and the season we find ourselves in. Maybe for you this morning, the very idea of getting out of bed is forward movement. And let's be honest, we all know someone, or I've known of people who get so low in life, that really is forward movement for them, just to get out of bed and just to do something with their day. For you, it may mean acting on something that has been in your heart for some time. Maybe there's been something that you put on the back burner. Something that you felt like God wanted to do when you were younger and you kind of forgot about it. You kind of walked away from it, but now you find yourself being stirred again. That would be forward movement when you act on that and move forward with that. It may mean taking a step of faith to help someone in need. And maybe you have a way to meet another person's need and you've been trying to figure out the right time. Well, maybe now is the right time, and that could be forward movement for you. Maybe it's talking to your coworker at work about your story and how Jesus fits into that story. And so for you, that could be forward movement. In my world, in the church world, in the world of church leadership, I believe that it can be best described as the steps that we are taking to live missionally. To live missionally, to stay on mission. Last year we went and we spent a week at Lincoln City. Anybody ever, spend some time at the beach? Right? Yes, my mom loves spending time at the beach, doing some agate hunting. But, you got to picture us. We rented a house, and so we take our tribe down, and we grab all our stuff, and we head down to the water, and we set up our little camp area, and throw down our blankets or our towels, and, all this stuff, have our books and everything with us. And the older girls, they sit there and they read, and the younger kids, they want to do right away is they want to get out in the water. And they want to wade in the water and enjoy it. Well, if you've been a parent before and you're sitting on the beach and you're watching your kids out in the water, because you've probably experienced this yourself. After time, they might be right in front of you, but after time, they slowly begin drifting. And the next thing you know is you're like yelling at them, hey, come back. And they can't hear anything you're saying, right? Because it's so loud and with the waves and stuff. And so you have to get out and go and make sure, hey, guys, come up, down. You guys are drifting. So if you've spent any time at the ocean, you understand, you get the idea of drift. You understand drift. It doesn't take long to drift from your original position. So think about that. Think about organizations, people, churches. We all, if we're not careful, have a tendency or can find ourselves in a place where we begin to drift. Or maybe we had an idea of what we wanted to do with our life, but then life kind of happens. Something disappointing happens and we find ourselves drifting from our life mission. Maybe this morning we really don't know our life mission, so we're just kind of out there just drifting, just doing our thing, hoping that things work out. As you know, there are many reasons why we drift. There are many reasons for missional drift, and they could be everything from success, when you really do something and you do it well, and then you start experiencing some success in what you do. You can find yourself drifting. Maybe for you, or for me, it could be doubt from disappointment. Where maybe you put yourself out there to do something bold and courageous for God, and you did it, and it didn't quite turn out the way you thought or hoped it should or would turn out. And so maybe you find yourself in a position of doubt, and so you've drifted because, he didn't come through in the way I wanted him to that time. Why would this time be any different? So we can allow doubt to kind of creep in and to keep us from living on mission. So we experience drift that way. It could be fear. Fear of what may happen. What if I'm not hearing God or whatever? It could be losing sight of the mission. Could be finding ourselves preoccupied, just busy in life. And it's easy just to get busy. And the busier we get, the more apt we are to what? To drift. Find ourselves drifting. And sometimes we find ourselves trying to copy what somebody else has done. And maybe you look at somebody else's life and you look at their life and you see success and you wonder, hey, I wonder if I did what they did, then maybe I could get to the same place that they got to. And so maybe you can kind of copy. As churches, it happens all the time. We find something that God is doing in another area and we think, that is good. I like the idea of that. It feeds our ego. We think, hey, let's try it here. And maybe you try it and then maybe it doesn't work out. And so we just continue to drift. For all of these reasons and more, we can find ourselves drifting in life. And it's very probable that you may be looking at your life right now and you're thinking, how did I get so far off track? I'm just not where I thought or hoped I would be. And maybe for one of those reasons, you found yourself drifting. Then it brings me to this point of asking, okay, what about comfort? How does the word comfort play into the idea of missional drift? Here's what we all know. Josh, you want to put up the next slide? Great things never come from comfort zones. Think about the great things that you've done, have attempted to do. Usually it's happened as you've been willing to what? To step out, to do something bold and courageous. To step outside of our comfort zones. Because it's easy to find ourselves comfortable. It's an interesting word, isn't it? And when I think of comfort, I think of that zone that keeps us from moving forward. And so in that sense, it's kind of a negative word, right? But we also know that there's a positive sense of comfort that's attached to that. So to be fair, not all comfort is to be avoided. I know that I'm a better driver today than I was when I was 16 years old. I just know I'm better at it. I'm more comfortable. I love driving, right? But we know with time and experience, you establish something, you get more comfortable doing it. And it just makes you better. I've shared this story before, but it reminds me of the time in high school when I was 16 and I had a 70 Chevelle and I was turning left and it didn't have a posi traction, but when you turn left, it tends to act like a posi traction. And so it just had rained, so it was just slippery enough just to, add a little fun to your driving. And I must have put a little too much on the gas pedal. And I'm pulling out left, and there's cars coming. There's 2 lanes that I'm pulling out, and the 2 lanes go in the other direction. And the school's right there, and the bus, and there's kids out. They're walking home and stuff, and must have given it too much gas. Pretty soon, I find myself swerving into the other lane. And, of course, at that moment, I panicked, right? Not as comfortable driving yet, not used to fishtailing and what that may mean in my car and how to correct that. And I had this really tiny steering wheel as well. And so what did I do? I overcorrected. So I was going this direction, so then I swung that baby the other way, and I did like a 90. It's like the car went boom, and then went right across 2 more lanes and right into the bushes. And I was able to stop, but here I am humiliated as the bus goes by, kids are there, and I gathered myself, quickly pulled out, make sure nobody saw it, right? And pulled into one of the cul-de-sacs right there close, and then I get out, and I'm just like, trying to... I went home later and I told my dad, I don't think I can handle that much power. My dad's like, you'll be fine. But lo and behold, there was a senior in a Trans Am that followed me in, and he pulled up behind me, and he rolled down his window, and you know what he did? He did what seniors do, right? He laughed at me. I'm like, man, I was ready to fight the guy, but he took off. And comfort. There are some things we do better when we're comfortable. When we lean into a certain level of comfort. Thinking about test taking. Maybe you're here today and maybe you've always been just not great at taking tests. The more you take them, the more you learn how to answer questions, the more you learn to find out what teachers are really looking for. You get better at taking tests. That happens as you lean into, as you kind of get more comfortable with test taking. That can happen. What about trying new things? Maybe some of us really don't want to try new things, but then we step out and we start trying new things, and then the more comfortable we get trying new things, the more apt we are to try new things, right? Because we're a little more comfortable doing it. Sometimes getting up in front of people, maybe that's like just causes all kinds of angst. I remember being in grade school, and there was a point in my life where, man, that would get me all shook up inside and anxious. And if the teacher were to call on me, man, I would get so nervous and was very, filled with a lot of angst toward having to give an answer in front of everybody else. And I didn't want to say anything wrong. Anybody like that? You just don't say anything because you don't want to say anything wrong or get the answer wrong and whatnot. So I used to feel that way. But the more I've been in front of people, the more comfortable you get. And the more you learn to lean into it and you get better at it. So I used to get nervous all inside. Now, here's the thing with comfort. There's some good sides, and then there's some negative sides. And the negative side takes on this look of negativity when it becomes something that becomes an obstacle in our lives to forward movement. Let's be honest, it's easy to get comfortable, and sometimes we get comfortable, and when we get comfortable, we can find ourselves being unwilling to try new things, to step out and experience new things in life. It's easy to get comfortable with the people we know, all right? I have my few friends, and I'm comfortable with that. I'm good with that, so I really don't need to invite anybody else in. It's easy to get comfortable with what we know, with what we've experienced, and we can kind of find ourselves locking into this zone of comfort where I'm good. Listen, where I'm good with the way things are. I'm good with the way things are. We need to think about when we find ourselves leaning into that zone, there are some risks that are associated with that. And here's some risks we need to be aware of. What's that risk? First, our growth as people. If you and I want to grow, we have to be willing to put ourselves out there. We have to be intentional. We have to be willing to take some risks and actually do some things to move forward. And so if we get comfortable and are fine with the way we are and how we are and what we know, then we can find ourselves stuck. Not growing as people because we like the way things are. Think about growth as a church. At risk is growth as a church. We want to grow. We want Jesus to move in people's hearts and lives. We want to see our friends and our neighbors come to know Christ. But we can find ourselves being comfortable with, hey, I like things the way they are. So there are a lot of things at risk with that. The movement of God. Think about the movement of the gospel outside of Jerusalem. Now, Jesus said go, and they said no. You can read the Gospels. Jesus said go, and they said no. But here's the thing. God's vision for the gospel was bigger than Jerusalem. And so there was a great persecution that happened in the early church that that forced them, if you will, to move out from their comfort levels, from what they knew and understood. It caused them to have to go to lands and people they didn't necessarily like or want to relate to. Comfortable. It's easy to get comfortable. The gospel is at stake. So it was the persecution that broke out, and it was a dream, right, that came to Peter that caused the gospel to go forth. So what's at stake? Friends, neighbor, a family member being reached with the gospel. The church, here's what's at stake too. We can find ourselves turning inward instead of looking outward. And what happens when we turn inward? We begin focusing on ourselves. What can we do to meet our needs? What can we do to take care of our needs, our people, our things, our ministries, what we're doing? In the process, we can find ourselves inward focused and missing what the gospel, what the mission is all about. It's about reaching people, being involved in God's mission. And as that happens, as we begin to turn inward, we start hearing things like this. How do we protect and take care of the things that we have? We start hearing more of that. And we start hearing about, what do we need to do to make sure that, our needs are met? And we start more things to, keep people happy on the inside. And we can find ourselves drifting from mission. We can find ourselves less concerned about the community and the impact that we can have on the community, that Christ can have on the community. We can find ourselves less concerned with how are we making the world around us a better place. And we at Harbor Life Church, that's what we believe. We believe we're here to make the world a better place. And I want you to think about in your life, a time in your life when you were hungry to make something happen. And so you gave yourself to it and you stepped out in courage and things began to happen in your life. And you began to run with a vision because you were hungry to see results, because you were hungry to see your friends come to Christ. Maybe God put something in your heart and so you began to move in that. But then life began to happen and you began to find yourself drifting from mission. And now we're just comfortable. Think about what's at stake. Sometimes we see that hunger replaced with comfort. I hear it all the time. Churches that launch, and there's a drive to reach lost people, to take the gospel. There's a hunger there to be part of something bigger than themselves, and then people start coming. They start experiencing transformation. Great things are happening. But then pretty soon there comes this shift at some point in the life cycle of a church and a people and a vision where we begin to look inwardly more, and then we drift. And you hear about that all the time. We used to be hungry. We're not anymore. Think about maybe your early relationship with Jesus when you were hungry to know Him, when you couldn't get enough. And then at some point we get a little comfortable. And then we begin settling, and it's, I'm fine. I like things the way that they are. And when we fall into that rut, we don't realize the impact that it has on the community and our family members and our friends and the people around us. There's a lot of risk associated with that. In the world of sports, it plays out with the guy who's hungry to make a name for himself. And so he works hard. Maybe he wasn't even drafted, and so he makes a name for himself, and he does great. And he gets a promotion, and the team recognizes him for that. And maybe another team signs him to this big fat contract. And then what happens? He struggles the next year. And the next year, what often happens is that hunger, that drive to once, do something has been replaced with a comfort. I have a big contract. I'm not hungry anymore. It happens in churches as well. It's easy to see how our comfort can contribute to missional drift. As I thought about this, it led me to, I believe the Holy Spirit led me to John 6. John chapter 6 came to mind. And John chapter 6 is an interesting chapter. And it's a long chapter, and there's a lot packed in John chapter 6. But you'll notice that John chapter 6 begins with Jesus feeding 5,000 people. Well, it was much more than that. So let's just say it. Jesus fed a whole lot of people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. I mean, this miraculous thing with 5 loaves and 2 fish happened before the people. And at some point, they began to catch on to what was happening. And it says that Jesus began to realize what was happening in verse 15. He says, I realize they're about ready to snatch me away and make me king, force me to be king. So he got out of Dodge and he went up on the hill to pray and be by himself. Because that's not what the Father had for him. That wasn't the will of God in that moment. So he gets out of town and he dodges a bullet there. But what you find is that a bunch of hungry people sought him out. He disappeared. Where'd he go? So a bunch of hungry people sought him out and Jesus began talking to them about true bread and true drink, what that looks like, about bread and drink that truly satisfies, that can truly satisfy the deepest longings that you and I have in our souls. He began to talk to them about life, about what life with God could look like with Him at the center. And Jesus says this to them. He says, I am the bread that comes down from heaven. And when He said that, things just began to break loose. And they began to take offense. And they began to respond in a very negative way to what Jesus was saying. And let's read verses 41 and 42 together. Verse 41 says this, with that little bit of background. It says, Then the Jews began complaining about Him because He said, I am the bread which came down from heaven. And they said, Is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that He says, I have come down from heaven? Think about that. Is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph? Here's the thing. The people who knew Jesus and were familiar with His life in the context of of who he was in that moment, they were comfortable with him in a certain light, in a certain context. But the moment that Jesus began to move outside of that, they became really uncomfortable with it. It threatened their comfort level. It threatened their familiarity with who they knew Jesus to be in that moment. What did they say? Isn't this Jesus who's the son of Joseph? And we know his mom, we know his family. So how is it that he can say, I have come from heaven? Here's the thing. They knew him in a certain way. Familiarity tends to breed comfort. When you and I become familiar with something, it tends to breed comfort. And the more familiar you are, and I am with something, the more comfortable we tend to become. So think about coming to church this morning. Maybe for you, you're real comfortable because you've been doing it for a while. But I want you to think about, just as I asked you early in the gathering, think about when you first went to church. If you didn't grow up going to church, think about the first moment you walked into a new church and that feeling of uncomfort. Now, I was thinking about that, and as a pastor, it's fun to watch sometimes because I'll watch you when you come in. And you don't know that I'm watching, but I watch people. And I'll notice angst on people. And I told a story in the first gathering about one gal. She came in, and I knew right away, this lady looked really uncomfortable. But she walks in, and I don't know what she expected or what she was looking for, but she walked in, didn't say hi to anyone, tried to avoid eye contact, and she went over and she sat down in this little corner right there. Now, right away, I know she doesn't feel very comfortable. But I feel like part of my job is to, challenge that a little bit. And in this sense, I want her to be comfortable. So I walk over and I sit down and I talk to her and didn't really want to have a conversation. So I get up and, I understood and gave her some space. Came in, did a couple other things, and I looked back again, and that lady, she was gone. She got out of here in a hurry. Some of us do a better job of hiding our angst than others. Some of us come in for the first time, and man, we might be really uncomfortable, but we don't show it as much. Some of us really show it. Here's the thing, though. Over time, it's crazy. The more familiar we get with something, the more comfortable we get. So maybe when you came in, you're like, man, I don't know anything about this church. I watched a little bit of their video on the website. I read some of their values and what they believe. I get a little bit of a sense, but that's not the same as actually coming in and experiencing the environment. So you might be thinking, I know nothing about what's going to go on with the kids' ministry. So that creates discomfort. I have no idea where I'm going to sit. Will people smile at me? Will they ignore me? Will they be friendly to me? And so it creates what? Discomfort. Where's the bathrooms? What if I have to go? Do I know? All of those things are a part of creating this discomfort. But if you come back again, that's why I encourage people to come back. It's always a good idea. Because you come back again, and then you'll recognize a few faces. And what happens is you recognize a few faces, you get a little more comfortable, it becomes a little more familiar. Right? You learn a couple names. You learn where the bathroom's at. You know that if you take Gary's seat, he's not going to jump down your back. In the process, we get a little more familiar, and as we get a little more familiar, we tend to get a little more comfortable. That's natural. That's a part of life. But over time, though, this familiarity can serve as an obstacle. We can get comfortable with what we are familiar with, and it plays out like this, where we get so comfortable with where we are, we're unwilling to try something new because I like where I'm at. When we're confronted with moving in a new direction, I resist it, I fight against it. Why? Because I'm comfortable with what I know. Some of you didn't hear that we were going to make some changes to the stage, and maybe my announcement surprised you because you weren't a part of that process. But here's the thing. Whether you were part of that process or not, it makes us uncomfortable because it's not something we're familiar with. So it's not so much that we're opposed to change sometimes. It's just we're comfortable with what we have. And in that sense, I guess we do become opposed a little bit, resistant to change. Some of us, we find ourselves in that place. We get comfortable when we quit dreaming. We keep believing God for new things to happen in our lives, for our family members to come to Him, for Him to use us in ways we once envisioned when we were young. And here's the thought that can kind of enter in, and the thought is this: I like things the way they are. I like it here. I like the people I know. I have my groupies. I have my homies. We're good. Us four and no more. It's easy to kind of fall into that line of thinking. I like the people I know, and I'm comfortable with them, so don't ask me to be inclusive. And then what happens when you're asked to be inclusive? When I'm asked to create space for new people. When I'm encouraging us to build relationships with others, to let other people in. Makes us a little uncomfortable, doesn't it? When we moved to a second gathering 2 years ago, I heard that a lot. I heard things like this: I like things the way they are. I know everybody now. And here's the undertone. The undertone is this: I like things the way they are. I'm comfortable with what I know. Now, the people who were familiar with Jesus had a certain level of comfort in knowing Him a certain way. And then when He came and began to break out of that mold, it made them uncomfortable. Notice, though, what happened as Jesus began to speak with vision. If you go back and you read through chapter 6, you'll see as Jesus began to speak with vision, as He began to speak of what life could look like, not just what it was, it made people uncomfortable because it confronted the status quo. It confronted what they knew and what they had become comfortable with. See, as Jesus began to challenge the status quo, the people most familiar with Him, they're the ones that were most threatened by it. Isn't He Jesus? Isn't He the son of Joseph? We know His parents. You see what I'm saying? What I'm getting at? Here's the thing with vision. Vision always challenges the status quo. And sometimes, a lot of times, this becomes threatening for that reason, because we're comfortable. Have you ever been around someone who has vision for their life? Here's what kind of happens. Either people migrate toward them or they scatter. People are challenged by it who want to grow and have vision for their life, want to hang out with people who have vision. People that are threatened by vision, they're threatened by vision because they're comfortable with where they're at. So what do? They avoid people with vision. They avoid being put in places where they have to be confronted with what they're comfortable with. Listen, vision always challenges the status quo, the way things have always been done. This is exactly what Jesus did. So put up the next slide, Josh. Jesus challenged His followers with a vision of what life could be like with Him at the center. Now, I understand that we all have a certain level of familiarity and comfort level of this is who Pastor Tyson is. This is who Pastor Matt is. This is who Pastor Kim and Jim are. This is what I can expect when I come in. We all get accustomed to that and we get familiar with that. Again, this is what I've come to expect and love, and we get comfortable with that, and I get that. But I want you to know, as the lead pastor here, I want you to know that I don't want to stay the same. I don't want to go on just living life as usual, business as usual, just buying into the status quo, just getting through another day so we can say we got through another day. I believe that God wants to do things in and through us. I want to dream again. I want to believe God for big things. I want to move forward, and even as I say that, I understand that that threatens our comfort level of what we've come accustomed to expecting. I want to lead with vision. I want to reach our full kingdom potential because I understand the why. There's a lot at stake. So what I realize, though, even as I say that, is that it messes with our level of comfort because it messes with what we're familiar with. And here's the thing. With vision, it's supposed to. If no one was ever challenging the status quo, we wouldn't have what we have in our world today. Right? If no one challenged the status quo, if no one was willing to say, hey, let's move from the place we're at, we would all be stuck. And so my challenge to us is let's be people who are willing to move. Let's not settle for the status quo. Let's not settle for the way things are, because I believe there's things that God wants to do. Let's prepare for the things that can be and not just the things that are. Now, my wife gave a great analogy concerning this. Imagine yourself on a river, and you're in an inner tube, and you're with people that you enjoy and love you, right? And you're out, and it's a beautiful sunny day, and so the sun's coming down on you, and you're just enjoying the vitamin D, and you feel like, man, this is the greatest day ever. The water is just the right temperature, right? Hunter and Levi, being out there in the river. I mean, there's nothing like it. And your friends are there, and you're like, I wish every day could be like this. And you get comfortable in that. But as you continue on down the river, pretty soon, not too long down the river, not too far down the river, and a bunch of junior high kids, boys, begin jumping in the river with their inner tubes, and they're getting you wet, and they're loud, and they're like crazy, and you're like, you just ruined my moment. I was comfortable, and you jumped in the water, and now I'm not so comfortable anymore. That's what vision's supposed to do. It's like those junior high boys jumping in the water with you. It's supposed to cause friction. It's supposed to stir us. It's supposed to cause us to want to move, hopefully, from our place of comfort. So my response to what I've shared here this morning is this. I want you to know that I will lead with a renewed vision, and energy. I will lead with a renewed vision and energy, growing and learning to lead with vision. This is an area I feel like I'm growing in, not only how to communicate, not only how to have vision, but how to communicate vision, because it's important, because we don't want to do this alone. We want to do it together. Habakkuk 2:2 says this. It says, record the vision and inscribe it on tablets, that the one who reads it may run. And what is the idea? If you know the vision, you can get behind the vision, and the more we get behind the vision, the more we're able to run with it. So we want to be able, for all of us, to be able to run with the vision. So what is my part? I'm working hard to become a better visionary. I have big vision, but it's been a little bit harder for me to take that big vision and communicate it in small pieces to where we can really get behind it and understand it. So what am I doing? I have people in my life that are speaking in my life that are helping me become a better communicator of vision. Why? Because I believe it. Because I believe God wants us to move forward. So I'm growing and learning to lead with vision. Not only that, I'm learning to lead with a renewed hope. Do you have people in your life who speak honestly to you? We're entering into year 9. And my wife recently, just last week, she said, I'm concerned about you. She said, I don't hear a lot of hope. Just hear frustration. Hear people not coming to church, or, whatever, people just doing their own thing, whatever. As a leader, that gets you. She said, where's your hope? That's not you. Get back to being you. So what am I going to do? I'm going to get back to being me, leading with hope. Believing God that He wants to do something great here. So out of that comes Project 16, and maybe you came in and you noticed the banner there, but Project 16 is something that I'm excited about, that we're excited about as a church. We'll be excited after today, after I announce it. But what is it? In June, we're going to head into our community with 16 projects. We're going to do 16 projects in June. And those 16 projects are going to be led by 16 people in our church, and maybe by you, because you might be sitting here and say, I could never lead something. I'm not a leader. I believe you can. And so maybe for you, just hearing that, like, man, I could do that. I could lead one of those community groups. So here's what we're going to do after today, casting this vision. Can you imagine 16 community projects just happening in the month of June, and that web of grace that will be extended in our community as we do? Our vision is to see everyone in our church involved in one of those community projects, even if you're not leading, to be a part of that. And I believe as 200 people, as 150 people, whatever you want to say that we are, as we head into our community, just imagine the impact as we do. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to collect ideas, casting the vision. Project 16 projects led in our community. Small and larger groups. So present the vision. We're going to collect ideas on the way out. Make sure you grab one of these pieces of paper. Maybe you know a neighbor who needs their yard reworked. Maybe you know someone who's just really in need, who's a widower, or someone who they need help. We're going to collect ideas, and then out of those ideas, we're going to come up with 16 projects, and then we're going to get 16 people to lead those projects. And then on the other side of that, we're going to get the teams together, and then we're going to go throughout the month of June. And we're just going to invade June, our community, with 16 community projects. You get to be a part of that. I'm excited about that. Again, think of the potential. Not only that, but starting May 16th, we're going to have 10 days of prayer and fasting. I'm going to challenge each and every one of us to step out and let's believe God together. Let's dream big. And let's trust Him, and let's pray, and let's sacrifice and say, God, we're serious about our community. We're serious about the gospel. We're serious about even laying aside some of our lives and what we're doing to be able to focus on this and say, God, this is bigger than us. And as I think about that, and as I think about Matt and Sarah and their transition and the next person coming in, here's what I get excited about. I get excited because I know the vision for youth and children is bigger than me. It's bigger than Matt and Sarah. It's bigger than any of us. This is the vision of God. I envision, a generation of young people and children that are living passionately for Him. That's bigger than any of us, but we can be a part of that. And so we're going to pray and we're going to fast and we're going to believe God for that. So that's my response. Here's what I hope from you. Here's what I hope your response will be. First of all, number one, I hope that you will choose mission over comfort. Hope you're at a place where you're willing to say, mission is more important than how I feel, than even more important than maybe what I want or what I think should happen. See, when the mission matters, when the mission is the most important priority, some of the peripheral things, of things that we like and we dislike and we want and we don't want, when we're living on mission, when we're doing it together, those things just kind of drop off. They don't mean as much. We don't get as excited when things change. We don't get as threatened when we talk about moving in a different direction. We talk about reaching more people. We talk about doing certain projects. Because we know the most important thing is the mission. The mission matters. So what are we going to do? We're going to choose mission over comfort. And not only that, but we're going to choose, and I hope you choose, vision over familiarity. Even in your own life. Maybe you're really familiar with where you're at and what you have, and you're good with that. But I would hope that you choose vision. God, what do you have for me today? I know I once dreamed big when I was young, and I just don't dream anymore. Well, maybe it's time that you dream again. And when you dream again, what are you doing? You're choosing vision over familiarity. Let's choose vision. Let's be willing to be moved from the status quo. Let's be willing to be part of something that's bigger than us. And then lastly, let's be willing to pray. Let's be willing to engage in prayer and be a part of this. Let's do it together. I believe this with all my heart. I believe that our best days are in front of us. Bryan Adams, if you grew up in the 80s, he wrote a song called Back in the Summer of 69. And he says, those were the best days of my life. And some of us are living as if the best days of our life are still in the past. Listen, as a leader, I refuse to live there. And I want to challenge you and encourage you that you too would refuse to live in that place. No, your best, they were good. But let's recognize they're good for a reason. Let's not stay there. Let's be willing to move forward. Let's not allow comfort to get in the way of what God has for each and every one of us and for us as a church in the future. For Matt and Sarah, for us, we want to do this together.